Oh, I guess I'm live. All right, cool. So, today I want to talk about this second podcast. I want to talk about why organization matters for a business, and why do you care as a small business owner? Why do you care about organizing your business? Why should you think about this? And and so there are four things that bug me, and the reason it bugs me is not because I'm a nerd. Uh, it's because they cost a business owner. So a lot of times, a significant amount of your life will go into building your business, and then when it comes to the end, we just haven't thought through everything. How are we going to hand this off? How long have we been preparing to sell our business? Um, and even in the meantime, does your wife hate you because you're running this business? Have you can you not take vacations? So there are a lot of things that matter, and I want to talk to you about. Let's just define the terms. What is organization? Why does it matter so much? And so Let's talk about four things. There's scaling and growing. There's making a business that can run without you in the day to day. Like you don't have to be there every minute. You don't have to stay up late at night answering questions. That a business that can sell that you can sell, and then a business that you can hand off successfully to your children, your son or daughter. All right, uh, scaling and growing. Let's talk about them one by one. Scaling and growing. And so, what is scaling and growing, and why does organization matter in scaling and growing? Well, if you can make repeatable systems that grow without the same amount of work, you're setting yourself up for scaling. So it's kind of like, you know, you take, it's kind of like we talk about kind of an infinite scaling model. Like if you're you develop some software that allows you to, you spend all your time, you spend, how many thousand hours or whatever, money building the software, and then you put it out to the world, and the cost of that next user is negligible. It's hardly anything. So you've already kind of built your systems because the software is systems that by definition is the ultimate system. It runs automatically without you there, unless there's a bug or unless, it interacts with the world and there's some kind of unforeseen situation, or the users are using it in a way that you don't expect. And that's just kind of like the ongoing improvement process, right? But for the most part, you have your software built, and the cost of supporting that next customer is very, very low. And so your system is built, and then your cost of the next customer is low. In the same way, you can do that with there's so many times where even in people run businesses, that there are savings, that there are abilities that there are problems or opportunities in your organization that would benefit. And if you had these processes, the it may take you 30 hours today to do something, but then once you have your process in place, then it takes you 28 hours. And then as you identify areas for improvement systematically, which we can talk about, you find areas of the biggest areas for possible improvement that can actually make your money go farther. And when you do this and you create these systems that are the same every time, where there's very little humans having to make discretionary decisions. Well, first of all, you don't have to hire experts. You don't have to hire the perfect person every time. You hire someone who has raw talent, and then or the raw right attitude and a good culture fit, and then you train them. And so there's savings there. And also, you don't want to create a position where you need to pay big bucks to find this unicorn who's the only person who can fill this role, right? Because that's expensive and it's hard. And then it puts you at the mercy of that person who you hire. Okay, so scaling and growing. Essentially, we're talking about is take a 30-hour task and turn it into a 28-hour task. And so that the next person that you the next client you bring on, it's a little easier now onboarding that client, helping that client. It's a lot easier now because you figured out an efficient way, and now you know what team you need. You know how to build. if you bring on a whale of a client, then you know how to build with your process. So scaling and growing helps you scale and grow. The second thing is it makes your business so it can run without you. And so there are two ways to duplicate yourself in an organization. A lot of business owners don't realize this. They don't think it's possible. They get in there and they're running things in the day to day, and they just don't. They I can't find the right employees. There's nobody good out there to hire. Occasionally they'll hire someone and they'll be good, but then they'll go on to another job because that's what great people do. Is they end up, sometimes moving on, and and then it's hard to replace them, right? And so making your business so it can run without you requires two things. And we already touched on a little bit of it here in when we talked about scaling, but two things: culture and process. And both of those things you can control. And so they allow you to duplicate yourself in the organization. All right, so think about this. What if you have processes that you've helped define? You've been involved in the process of creating the process. So you've been involved in it, and so now your voice is in the process, and then you just tell everybody repeat this process, right? There's a great book about that. It's called The E Myth by Michael Gerber, and it's just all about how McDonald's went from a hamburger joint to creating this repeatable process where you just repeat it. The evaluation of new property for a new restaurant, um, everything from the investing in the new restaurant, the market studies, and Starbucks as well, all the way to how you make the hamburger and how you control quality. So all those things McDonald's does really well, and Michael Gerber uses Ray Kroc, I think is one of the founders of McDonald's, tells that story, and it's really inspiring. And I think if you wanted to know more about that, you could pick up that book, The E Myth, and then E Myth Revisited. I think it's not on my shelf right now, my main shelf. All right, um, so processes duplicate you within the organization. The next thing is culture. Now, how do you create a culture? How do you essentially say, okay, we have our processes, but what about things that fall outside of the processes? What about things that we didn't define in the process? Let's say there's some customer service. How do I tell people the attitude and how to be an employee of my company? Likewise, what about a manager? And the manager has their processes, they look at their charts and everything, and you have that all figured out, but then you're gone for a week in Mexico on vacation with your family. And then something comes up and they're like, I don't know how to handle this because it's not in the process. The question then is, what kind of culture have I created? Is it a culture of customer service? Is it a culture of, customer service where the manager is allowed to call clients out when they're wrong or your customers out when they're wrong and allowed to just set things in order? Or is your culture the customer is always right? We do everything that they want. And then all of a sudden a customer comes in and they ask for something totally unreasonable, something you can't do, and something the manager is like, if I did this, I don't think it would be good, right? How do you tell them how to make those decisions when you're gone? Aside from channeling, finding some new age, weird, culty way to channel, which I don't recommend. Um, as a Christian, I cannot recommend that. But um, how do you do that? How do you essentially channel right yourself through your managers? And that's by creating a brand that makes sense. Now, that brand is going to do way more than help your manager. That brand is also going to help your employees, and it's also going to help your clients and customers know how to think about you. They're going to know a lot of, like, without hearing you talk about it, they're going to know what you would and wouldn't do, not just what you've done or what you've promised, but what you would and wouldn't do. And that's powerful because now people out there in the market will say, okay, I'm convinced that this company is the company I want to do business with. They get convinced way quicker because you're putting it all out there. And yeah, there's accountability with that. If you have a brand that says one thing and you say another, and you do another, right? then everybody's like, I don't trust those guys. They're not who they say they are. And that's can be in some ways more damaging than not having a brand at all. But if you go about it right, the process is really based on finding out what you really do value and finding out what makes sense to you, and then turning those into values, personality traits, and then your brand story. And then the brand story, from all those things, you get verbal and visual guidelines. And from there, you can build out customer service guidelines, but really you don't need to, because you can just have them read the values and then review those values in all hands meetings. So this isn't rocket science, and it shouldn't be a black box, although it feels like sometimes it is, because none of these things pay off tomorrow. It's not like I'm going to throw more money into advertising, an advertising channel I know will work, and we're going to get our money back immediately. These are things that grow you over time and organize you over time, so that in 5 years, as you just slowly and methodically put a little bit of your time and thought toward scaling, you're going to have a company that you can be super proud of, that represents everything that you value, and everyone in it does too. Okay, so that's kind of the big one. Make your business so it can run without you by thinking about process and culture. All right, let's get to two of the last things. So, and they're very similar, because and they're selling your company and then handing off your company to a son or daughter. These are pretty similar, because organization helps in the same way for both these people. So for a seller, think about a buyer. Does a buyer want to buy a company that doesn't seem like they run well, that they're going to have to go in and solve all kinds of problems? Or does a buyer want to buy a business they don't have to understand completely the first day? It's the second one, right? So another thing about buying, and think about this, a buyer, because a company I would buy, the companies I look at to buy are companies that are that have. So I'm good at operations, and I know something about culture. So those two things we just talked about. And then I also know a little bit about marketing, because my training was in journalism, advertising, and so I to me, message is very important. So um, I know a little bit about those things. So I want to buy companies that have maybe have that still run, they still get sales, but maybe could use a little bit more of my communication understanding, because now I have some upside. I know that there's an area where I can grow the business and actually make it worth more pretty quickly. But even more than that, operationally and culturally, I know I can make the brand better. And so if there's a brand that's already working, already making money, and I can buy that brand based on the cash flow that it's getting right now, and there's nothing that's going to really change. What I can do is I can go in and buy it for that price, and then I can immediately, if the brand is weak, if or the culture is weak, if the processes are weak, I can fix that. That's something I can fix, right? And so that's attractive to me. Now, if the whole company's a mess, I'm like, I don't understand that business. I don't want to bite this off. It's going to be more than I can chew. And I don't trust it. And you could offer me a super killer deal. You'd have to offer me a killer deal. And why should you do that? Why shouldn't you just go in and get this company ready to sell 5 years, 5 years earlier? And just it's a marathon, guys. It's not a sprint. And so get this company ready to sell 5 years earlier, and then get top dollar out of the company. Um, and then handing off to a son or daughter is very similar, because you want it's a little different though, because you don't really care what the buyer wants. If you're selling the company to someone you don't know, you don't really care what the buyer wants. You don't care what they do. Well, I mean, it's a company you've built, but for the most part, in the end, it doesn't really matter to you. They're going to go, and you can forget about the company, and you can, move on. But when you're handing it off to your son or daughter, you want organization, but for a different reason. So you want them to be successful. So you want to hand off a business that already works And even though they may not have all the strengths you do, they may be a little different than you are. They may have different strengths. They may be more like their mom or if you're a woman, more like the dad or whatever. But what you want to do is hand them off something to where it already sort of works. And then you can even coach them in some of those areas they're weak in, but and you don't have to be full time, right? You can hand that business off, coach them in areas they're weak, and then in areas where they're strong, you can develop their confidence. You can let them shine in those areas. Just like how I told you, right? I want to buy businesses that have weak operations, weak processes, weak cultures, one or the other, or weak marketing is another thing I would take. But with your son or daughter, they may be just like me. They may be strong in areas where you're not. And so by handing them off a business where at least operationally it kind of works, and then they may be more artistic. So you may say, hey, you may want to build our brand a little more, right? They may be more like touchy feely. You may want to build our brand or our sales a little more, right? You may want to build these things out. And so you're handing them off something that they can play with and be successful with. All right. So those are really the four scale, the four reasons you want organization is so you can scale and grow your business and make more money year to year, year over year. Make your business so it can run without you, so you can take vacations and your wife won't hate you. Your family won't hate you. To where you can sell it to somebody else and have it be organized enough to where that person is not buying a junk, something they don't understand, just something that's a mess. And then finally handing it off to children, handing it off to a son or daughter, an adult son or daughter, and then giving them something that they can be a success with. All right, so those are the four big ones for me, and they frustrate me because I know they can be fixed, and I want to see companies do it. And so that's why this channel exists, is just so you can know what's possible and then go do it. All right. Anybody who's watching, thanks. Put your questions in there. I'll definitely answer them. And this channel doesn't have any questions. It doesn't have any traffic. So if you ask a question, I don't have anything better to do than to answer them. Thanks for watching.